Ever put like tons of work into a research project and then someone's just like, okay, but who cares?
Yeah, you need a way to show that it matters, like to steer your project so it has a real impact.
So that's where like assessment and evaluation come in, I guess.
Yeah, you got it. And while they sound similar, they're actually pretty different.
Oh, really?
Assessment is like your compass always checking if you're on the right track during your research. It's those regular check-ins to see if you're making good progress towards your goals.
Makes sense. So it's all about making sure you don't get lost along the way.
Exactly. Think of them as milestones,
Yeah.
like completing your literature review or maybe gathering a certain amount of data. Those are all milestones, and they show you have a clear plan, you're organized, and you're making progress.
And I bet having those milestones is super important when you're trying to get funding for your project, right?
Absolutely. Funders want to see that you're serious about the project, not just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Mm.
A solid assessment plan shows you've thought it through and that you're going to measure success and stay on track.
So assessment is about looking ahead, making sure you're on course.
Yeah.
But where does evaluation fit in?
It's like when you reach the top of a mountain and you look back on your journey, it's a bigger picture assessment of how much of an impact your research had overall. Did you achieve your goals? What did it add to your field? How long did the impact last?
So it's like assessment is the journey and evaluation is the destination.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
And just like thinking about a trip can make your next one better evaluation, provides valuable feedback for your future research. It helps you figure out what worked well, what could be better, and how to make your next project even more impactful.
Wow, this is really making me rethink how I approach my own work. It's not enough to just do the research. You got to make sure it matters.
Exactly. And there are concrete ways to do that even while you're still working on the research itself.
Oh, really? Like what? Give me an example.
Well, one common method is having regular progress reviews. They can be formal meetings or written reports where you update everyone involved on your findings, any challenges you're facing and how the project's coming along.
So you're saying it's important to be open about everything, not just the good stuff.
Yeah, transparency builds trust. And these reviews aren't just for your funders either. They're a chance for you to really think about your own progress. You can compare your findings to your initial ideas, see what's working, what's not, and even tweak your methods.
That's a good point. It's like checking your map to make sure you're still headed in the right direction.
Exactly. That kind of self-assessment, those internal benchmarks you set for yourself, that's a sign of a strong researcher.
You know what? This is making me realize I need to be way more intentional about adding assessment into my research process. It's not just another thing to check off the list. It's actually a tool to make my work way better.
That's the key. It's about moving from just doing research to becoming a more thoughtful and impactful researcher. It's not just about how you do the research, though. When you get to evaluation, you start to focus on the outcomes. What did your research actually achieve? Did it actually make a difference?
So we're talking about concrete results. Like, give me an example of what kind of outcomes.
Well, it depends on what you're researching, of course, but say you're looking at a new treatment for some disease. A positive outcome would be showing that it works better than the old ways, but maybe even saves more lives.
Oh, wow. That's a big one. It's
Yeah.
not just about learning more. It's about actually helping people.
Exactly. And if you were doing social science research, maybe a good outcome would be if your research changed some policy or helped people understand a complicated problem.
So it's all about making a difference in the real world, whether it's in a lab or out in society.
Yeah, you got it. And that impact is something funders really care about. They want to know that their money is leading to some real results.
That makes sense. Now, how about sharing those results? Where does dissemination fit into all of this?
Dissemination is super important. It's how you make sure your findings reach the people who can use them. So maybe you publish in academic journals or present at conferences.
But it's not just about talking to other academics, right?
Right. It really depends on the research, but it could also mean doing some community outreach or even working with policymakers to make your findings lead to real change.
So evaluation looks at how well the research is communicated and shared too.
Absolutely. Research shouldn't just sit on a shelf collecting dust.
This is all making sense now, but how do researchers actually measure the impact of their work? What metrics do they use?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. And again, it depends on what kind of research you're doing. If you're in academia, citation counts are often used to see how influential your work is, how often other people reference it.
So it's like a popularity contest for research papers. The more citations, the bigger the impact.
Kind of, but it's more than that. It's showing that your research has inspired other people and is helping to advance knowledge in your field.
Okay, I get it. But what about research outside of academia? If citations aren't that important, How do you measure impact then?
Let's go back to that social science example. You could look at how many policies were influenced by your research or how community groups are using your findings to make their programs better.
So you're looking for proof that your research made a real difference.
Exactly. And when you're writing your research proposal, the more specific you can be about those outcomes, the better funders want to see that you've really thought about what success means and how you're going to measure it.
This is really helpful.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm starting to see the bigger picture now. But can we get into some practical tips for researchers who are trying to use these ideas in their work?
Of course. The biggest thing to remember is to be specific, especially in your research proposal. Don't just say you'll be keeping an eye on things. You need to describe exactly how you'll assess your progress, what methods you'll use, what you'll measure.
So you're saying paint a clear picture for whoever's evaluating your proposal.
Right. Don't leave any doubt that you have a solid plan.
Got it. So be specific. What else can make a research proposal really stand out?
Lay out some clear milestones in your timeline points where you can show you're heading those targets. It's like planning stops on a road trip across the country.
I like that makes the whole project feel less daunting and gives you something to celebrate along the way.
Yeah. And it makes it way easier to track your progress and change things up if you need to. And that's important because research rarely goes exactly how you planned it.
You're telling me I've definitely hit some unexpected snags in my time.
Right. So you got to be flexible, have a plan for when things go wrong.
So you don't have to pretend it's all going to be smooth sailing. Just show that you can deal with the bumps in the road.
Exactly. You might have to adjust your timeline or your methods, maybe even rethink parts of your research question. The important thing is to be open about those changes and show how you'll still reach your goals.
That makes sense. It's like having a backup map in case you need to take a detour.
Yeah.
You might have to take a different route, but you can still get where you're going.
Exactly. And sometimes those detours lead to something completely new and exciting. Another important part of being flexible is taking feedback on board.
Feedback from who?
From all sorts of people, your funders, colleagues who are reviewing your work even from your own findings as you go. Be open to suggestions and use them to improve what you're doing.
So don't be afraid to change things up as you learn more.
Right, that kind of openness shows funders that you're really dedicated to doing good research, even if it means making changes. And don't forget, when you're planning your evaluation, make it crystal clear what success looks like for this specific project.
Sounds simple enough.
You'd be surprised how many people get stuck there. You need to define what you want to achieve, the impact you're aiming for, in a way that you can actually measure. How will you know if your research was successful? What changes are you hoping to see?
So you're saying connect those outcomes to your assessment methods and the metrics you're using.
Exactly. Having that clarity of purpose makes your proposal stronger, and it also helps to guide your research and keep you focused on what really matters.
This has been an awesome deep dive. I feel like I learned so much about assessment and evaluation stuff that's often overlooked.
My pleasure. They might seem like technicalities, but they're essential tools for any researcher who wants to make a difference.
I couldn't agree more. For our listeners out there, remember, assessment and evaluation aren't just boxes to check. They're how you make sure your research is strong, has a real impact, and leaves a mark on the world.
So use these ideas, build them into your work, and watch your research truly flourish.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep pushing the boundaries of what we know.